Hi guys, it's Shelly here. Welcome to my channel and thank you for joining me today. On today's video, I'll be sharing with you a colour along from a new artist's book, Lalita Iyer, called Enchanted Creatures. And I've just recently done a flip through review of this book. It's releasing, I think this week actually. I got a pre-release copy from the publishers, which are Page Street Publishing. Their books are of such a high quality and I really enjoy colouring in their books. So yeah, I've done a review. I'll try and remember to link it in the description box below. And I thought I'd do a colour along in this book. I was really looking forward to colouring another page in the book. And I thought, okay, let me record it as the book is coming out this week. And maybe some of you will be interested in it. The first page I coloured in this book was from the Water Bees section, and it was the whale page, and I absolutely loved colouring it. I really enjoyed it, and so I couldn't wait to jump in and do another page, and the peacock grabbed my attention this time. I don't think I've coloured many peacocks because I've been very intimidated and I shy away from colouring peacocks because they're such beautiful, majestic birds and I don't know if I can do it justice with my colouring. And so I've never really coloured that many peacocks. I always shy away from it. But this time I was inspired to do it and I thought, okay, I better jump in and do it while the motivation to tackle this page is there. I know most of you may not have this book or may not get it very quickly. It's just releasing this week, but I thought I'd do a colour along in it just to show you how I'm going to tackle the pages in this book because it is a Zendoodle book. I don't do Zendoodle colouring very often. I very rarely do actually because I'm not usually the kind of person who goes for patterns and shapes and I don't know how to usually approach those kind of pages. But when I coloured the first page in this book, I really enjoyed it and I used soft pastels for basing and I just went over all the details, all the patterns, and then I used some pencils to sort of put in a little bit of shading, a little bit of detailing to bring a bit of depth to the illustration. And yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. I surprised myself. So my approach to these illustrations in this book, the Zendoodle patterns, will be a lot of the times probably just colouring over all the patterns and then picking out certain bits where I want to put in a bit of shadows and make the patterns pop a little bit. In certain areas, I'll probably just go in with some glitter gel pen and bring in sparkle to the pages. And yeah, most of the time I will not be colouring every single little shape that is on the Zendoodles. A lot of these pages have a mix, so there'll be certain areas that have a Zendoodle pattern, certain areas are quite plain. You have backgrounds you can do. The florals and botanics don't have much Zendoodle patterns on it, so you can colour them as you wish. But yeah, I think the Zendoodle part of the illustrations, I'll probably just colour over or base over, whether it be with Tombow gel brush pens or soft pastels, and then go over with a little bit of pencil to bring out some depth to the patterns. And I'll also pick out certain parts of the patterns to put a lot of glitter gel pen to bring sparkle to the pages. When I did the whale page, I used soft pastels for basing and I really enjoyed how the soft pastels worked on this page and I enjoyed the soft effect that it gave me. So the idea for this page was to use soft pastels again. However, I started with my background, which I normally do, and I thought that this particular illustration needed a background. I just felt like I wanted to bring attention, focus to the peacock, and so I decided I want to make the outer parts of the page, the borders of the page, darker, coming in lighter to bring attention to bring your eyes directly to the peacock. So I started off with the background and I used soft pastels for that. I use my blending tools with sponges, which I have spoken about a couple of times now in my colouring space video, in my haul video that I just recently did. So I showed you about those blender tools and I think they work a lot better now for me compared to what I used to use, which was cotton pads and cotton buds. The lay down is a lot smoother, it feels nicer when you're laying it down, less dust. There is still going to be dust. There are soft pastels, so they'll always be messy. but it's less than when I use cotton pads, and so I love using these blending tools. I went for a few colours and I just spent my time layering them up, deepening up the corners of the pages, coming in light towards the peacock. I will share the colours, all the colours I use for this page in the description box below. For the soft pastels, I'm using my Faber Castell Albrech Dürer, my Faber Castell soft pastels, the 72 set. For the pencils, I'll be using my Faber Castell Albrech Dürer pencils. I do not activate them with water on this page, and I do a lot of basing with Tombow dual brush pens as well. The shades will be up on screen, but also listed in the description box below per item on the page, so that you can, if you are going to follow along, get all your materials ready before you get started. So I spent quite a bit of time doing my background, making sure I was happy with the darkness that I got in the corners of the pages, and I took my time layering up, getting the effect I wanted. And then following that, I went ahead and erased out any areas that had gone over some of the line art which I did not want to colour on. So for example, the flowers were not going to be a green blue, so I definitely needed to erase those. I wasn't too concerned if some of the colour had gone onto the leaves, because the leaves were going to be green, so it would get covered up. But depending on what colours you're going for, erase off any areas that you don't want the soft pastel colour on. And I used the Derwent electric eraser and a Tombow mono eraser for the smaller details. And then once you're happy with the laydown of your soft pastels, you've erased off any areas you don't want the colour on, then make sure you spray the page with a workable fixative before getting started with your pencil work, so that you don't smudge your soft pastels all over the place while you're working on this page, because it will transfer very easily. So use a workable fixative. I use Winsor & Newton Professional Fixative. It's quite a strong smell, so most people may not really like it, but I would recommend spraying it in a well-ventilated room or outside. I show the can that I use on screen. So my aim was to use soft pastels for basing everything like I did for my whale page. However, once I'd done the background, I realized that if I start putting soft pastels on the main illustration as well, it's going to get really messy, and the color obviously transfers. It's very hard to lay down soft pastels neatly enough that it doesn't go in areas that you don't want it to go in. So I realized that it's not going to work for all the small feathers that we have, and for the leaves, and it's probably going to go into the background, and the colors are going to mix, and it's going to get very messy. So I decided to just stick to soft pastels for the background. You will see on screen that I use a little mini vacuum, desk vacuum, to vacuum up the soft pastel dust. It works really well. You don't have to use a brush to brush off all the soft pastel from your page and transfer it again everywhere. So it helps to just vacuum it up, and then obviously clean your desk area and everything before you carry on, because soft pastels are very messy. Now, those of you who don't like the messy aspect of soft pastels, you have the option of using possibly pan pastels, which are less messier, less dusty. They're a lot more pricey, which is why I don't own them yet, but I've heard that they're wonderful to work with. So that could always be an alternative for those of you who do not like using soft pastels. And the effect I got with the soft pastels for the background, I guess you could also use distressing, because you could get that smooth, blurry sort of effect, a nice blended look with distress ink as well. So if you don't have soft pastels or don't like using them, you could consider trying the background with distress ink. It might become a lot more intense with the number of layers that you put. Like I put a lot of layers of soft pastel, so with distress ink it could get a lot bolder, but depending on the colors you use, you might be able to keep it a bit subtle. I didn't want it to overpower the peacock, which is why I went for soft pastels in this instance. I knew that for this page I wanted all the focus to be on the peacock. I want the peacock to look, it is the centerpiece on the page. I want it to look majestic. I want it to look luxurious, rich. and I want your eyes drawn directly to that peacock. And so I needed to make sure that everything else around the peacock doesn't take away from that peacock. In my mind, I knew what I wanted my peacock to look like. I had the idea that I'm going to be making it, yes, blues and turquoises and hints of sort of a purple tone in my shadow areas. And I knew that I was going to work with gold. I wanted to put in a lot of gold accenting or embellishments to bring sparkle to this page and to make it look really rich. And I think partly my inspiration was from clothing in India, which is rich and luxurious with all the gold and the colors on the peacock. Just made me think of certain clothing that you get in Indian clothing. And so that's what I had in mind for the peacock, and I knew that everything else around it cannot take away from that peacock. At the same time, I did not think I would be able to make the peacock look very realistic. I don't think I have the skill set to make it look super realistic, and so I decided to make it look more like a painting. And so I did not work on making the body of the peacock, the head and body of the peacock, to feather-like. I made it look more like it's shiny and it's a painting rather than realistic. And so that's the kind of idea I sort of went for. So with the background, with the peacock itself, and then the colors around it, I just wanted it to look like a painting rather than super realistic. Hopefully that will come across. So as I always do, I will dip in and out with a little bit of commentary about what I'm doing on the page, what I was thinking, what I used, or any technique. So I'll go in and out as I do nowadays with my colour-alongs, and talk you through my process for this page. Hope you guys enjoy it. Once I had done the background, I decided to start basing the rest of the page, at least the elements that I knew what color I wanted to go for. Now, like I mentioned, the first instance when I saw this page, I thought I would do everything based with soft pastels, but because I decided to do a background and I used soft pastels for it, I couldn't use soft pastels for the main elements. It was just going to get too messy. So I pulled out my Tombow gel brush pens for the basing. I will share on screen the colors I'm using and make sure I put them in the description box below as well. I didn't use that many colors because there weren't that many different elements on the page, and I wanted to try and limit my color palette so that, again, I don't take focus away from the peacock. I tried to put in a little bit of shading as well with my Tombows, mainly for the peacock, the body of the peacock, to put in the shadow areas so that when I came in with pencils, I did not have to do too much blending or too many layers. I still do a lot of layers, but I don't spend as much time trying to cover up the whites of the paper. With pencil, you can do exactly the same thing without basing with Tombows, but if you're going to use pencil on its own, you will be working quite a bit to cover up the whites of the paper, and that takes a lot of time. So even though I still go in with lots of layers, because the effect I like is to have the deep shadow areas, I still take less time than I would take if I did not base, because I'm not working to cover up the whites of the paper. That's done with the base. I'm literally just working to put in my shadows and highlights and create my 3D effect. So it does help to put a base down. So I decided to go ahead and put in all the basing, and so I knew what color I was going to do the peacock, and I sort of had an idea of the colors for the flowers and of course the leaves as well. There are certain elements you'll see that I leave out and I don't put base yet. This is, again, like I say, for every page I color, I don't have a vision of what exactly I want as the end result. I have an idea of certain elements on a page and I work with those to begin with, start putting color on a page before I can see what the other elements are going to be or how I'm going to distribute the color on the rest of the page. So you will see me leave out certain elements, but I do come back in the video once I've got more color on the paper to fill in those elements with a bit of basing and then carry on in color with pencil. So for the peacock, I wanted the body of the peacock to be a bright blue, a rich blue, and I wanted the shadow areas to be really dark, but with a hint of purple. With the Tombow dual brush pens, I was just basing down the blue parts of it, and I was going to work with the pencils to bring in the deep shadows. So I do put in a couple of layers on the body to give that effect, and even on the feathers as well. So bright blues, like I think it was light phthalo blue or middle phthalo blue, and oh no, sorry, those are the pencils. So with the Tombows, I was just using the bright blues for the body and for some of the feathers. And then for the other feathers, I decided to break up the bright blues with the turquoises, with a turquoisey color, a bit of green, hints of green. You can have peacocks of any color, I guess. Well, in nature, it would be usually blues, turquoises, greens. Yeah, I wanted a hint of green in there. I wanted turquoises in there just to break up all the other blues. And I decided to bring in a bit of yellowy orange as well to break up all of the turquoises and blues that I put there. But I did not want too much of that. I wanted the rich blue effect on the peacock. So I do put in a little bit of a yellow basing where I'm going to put some effect of a orangey yellow on the peacocks. I keep that quite sparse though. So yeah, you'll just see me basing all those elements first and putting in a bit of shadows on certain areas as well with the Tombows. And then because I knew that I was going to just make the leaves a conventional green, I decided to go ahead and base the leaves as well and not go for a very bright green. I wanted them to be a bit toned down again because I do not want to take away from the peacock. So I knew I was going to use my in my pencils the yellowy greens, the more realistic greens, and rather than the brighter greens. So yeah, I put down a base for the leaves, and then I went ahead and started basing my flowers as well. For the flowers, I decided to stick to pink. I thought that would look really nice with the peacock, but I didn't want anything too bright, so I wanted more fleshy toned pinks and peachy pinks as well. So I decided to go for pink as well as sort of peach flowers. So together they would look really good, and again, not be too bright for the peacock. Now, I apologize, I did lose some footage during the basing part. I think I forgot to press record, or I pressed record at the wrong times after I'd based it. So I did not realize that, but I do share the combinations of Tombow that I used. I just used one color for two colors, distributed them with the flowers. So a peachy color for some of the flowers and a pinky color for one of the flowers. I think the pink was a 761 and the peachy sort of tone was 910 in the Tombows, and I don't put any shading or anything like that. I literally just base the flowers and decide how I'm going to distribute the colors of the flowers. So the basing helped really with two things. One was covering up the whites of the paper so you don't spend too much time trying to cover up with pencils, because that would take a lot longer and a lot more patience. And the second thing is it made the coming in when you come in with pencils a lot easier and more relaxing, because you already have the idea of what colors are going to go down on the paper and where they're going to be distributed. So it really does help basing on certain pages. So on this page it really helped me, and so yeah, I really enjoyed the whole basing and then going in with the pencils. After basing the peacock, the leaves and the flowers, I decided that that was enough for me to get started and put color down on the paper so that I could see a bit better what are the colors or where the rest of my colors were going to go or how they're going to be distributed. So I decided to start with the pencils. Now you may notice that I haven't based a part of the wing of the peacock and the head, the parts of the feathers that are coming off the head as well. And the reason is I did not know whether I was going to make them blue or add in a bit of yellow. So I wanted to see how the orangey yellow that I was going to introduce into the feathers was going to look on the tail, was going to look, not the tail, the wing. Is it the tail? Is it the tail that opens up? Yeah, it is, isn't it? So yeah, on the tail, I wanted to see how the orange is going to look and whether it takes away too much from the peacock before I decided how much more yellow I was going to add to the peacock. So I did leave those areas without a basing until I started putting pencil down so that I could visualize it a bit better. Hopefully you guys are catching the screenshots where I show where we have reached before I go into the next stage of my coloring on the page. So yeah, hopefully that helps. So the basing is all done, the background is all done. So now for me, the fun begins. I love working with pencils, and it's time to start working with the pencils and bringing in the depth to the illustration. So I decided to start working with the peacock first because that's the centerpiece, and I wanted to make sure that the centerpiece looks good before I start working on the back, the other elements on the page. If I started working on the other elements on the page, there is a risk that I would make them too bold, too poppy. No, poppy is not the word, but basically I may end up making them stand out too much, and it would be really hard to then make the peacock stand out. So I had to work on the peacock first and then work on everything else around it so that I could make sure I keep them toned down compared to the peacock. I started working on the body of the peacock so that I could figure out the color that I wanted, the bright blue color that I wanted, and that's the color I was going to bring into some of the feathers on the tail of the peacock as well. And so I needed to figure out that color first, so I decided to do the body of the peacock. Now I did look at some inspirational pictures to get an idea of how to do the shadowing for the neck, to make it look 3D, and what to do with the face, because we have those two little sort of ovally shapes around the eye that have been drawn in, and I didn't know what those should look like. And I think I saw an illustration or a painting or a picture or a photo that showed that they can be left white. So I decided to leave those white, and I just started working on the body and deepening up my shadows. Now I decided to go for bright blues, but I wanted to add in a little bit of hints of a purpley blue as well in the shadows. So like I always say, I usually tend to start with my mid-tone colors, but I work from my shadow areas into my highlight areas, and I try to maintain my highlight areas as much as possible. So I start with my mid-tones and work to my light tones, and then I go back into my shadows and start deepening up my shadows with darker shades as well. So I think I used a cobalt blue as my mid-tone and worked to, was it middle phthalo? I won't remember, but it'll be up on screen. But some of the phthalo blues and the light cobalt turquoise as well as my lightest shade. And then I went into the shadow areas, and for the purpley tone, I decided to bring in the Delft blue because it's not too purpley. It still has that blue element to it, and it would give that little bit of a purple undertone to my shadow areas, which is what I wanted. Because yeah, sometimes when you look at peacocks in nature and they move around, you sort of get hints of purple, hints of blue, hints of green. And so, yeah, I decided to bring in a bit of purple into the shadow area, and I'm glad I did. But yeah, I work in my shadow areas and I deepen up, I layer and I intensify the shadow areas because, as I always say, I feel that making that contrast between your shadow areas and your highlight areas is what makes your coloring pop. And so the way to do this is to make sure that your shadow areas are really, really intense and bold and dark, and then the highlight areas are kept very light, almost you might even have a bit of a white area, the whites of the paper, or a very light base color as your highlight tone. And that contrast between the shadow area and the highlight is what will give you your 3D effect and will make that element pop. And so I love working on my shadow areas and layering it up. For those of you who do not like layering up so much and just want to get that coloring done and you don't have that patience, then you don't have to put in all those layers. You'll notice that just with a few layers of the blue, you get a good effect, and you do not need to put in that extra time and waste time in the shadows if you don't want to, because you get a nice 3D effect already with your mid-tones and your highlight tones. But yeah, I like to spend a bit more time in my shadows, and that's what you'll see me doing on the body of the peacock. I'm so happy with how intense the blue is on the body, and I'm happy to carry on with the rest of my peacock now. It took me a lot of time doing the body, but I got the effect I wanted. So yeah, I did spend that little extra time on the body, but I think I needed to. So now I'm happy with the blues I've used for the body, and I used these same blues for some of the feathers on the tail of the peacock to make sure it all ties in together. I can't make all the feathers look different or the tail look completely different to the body. So some of those blues that I've used, or all of those blues that I've used in the body, I'm using on some of the tail feathers, and that's what you'll see me doing now, just layering those down. Now, I'd already put in some shadowing with the Tombow dual brush pens as well. So again, there's not that much work to do now. I know it's going to be quite a few feathers to do on the tail, but it doesn't take that long because they're smaller elements. I've got some shading in, I've covered up the whites of the paper, and now I'm just laying down the colours. And it's such a relaxing part of colouring this page, I found. I'll show you how I colour some of the feathers with all the colours that I used, and then I will just, if I'm not mistaken, I will lay down the cobalt blue, which is my mid-tone blue, onto all the rest of the feathers that I will be colouring the same colour. And the reason I do this is just to show you where the shadow is going to be, because as I always say, you guys are going to get so fed up of me saying this, I work from my shadow areas to my highlight areas. So once you've seen me do the colour combination for these feathers, I will just lay down the cobalt blue, which is the mid-tone, so you know where the shadows are going to be, and you'll figure out the highlights. So it just makes it easier to know how I'm going to create that 3D effect with the feathers. So yeah, I go ahead and show you a few feathers with all the color combination, and then I will just lay down my mid-tone into the shadow areas so you know how to work the rest of the feathers with regards to the shadow and highlight areas. Hope this helps. If you guys don't like me doing that, do let me know, but I think it helps in a way. At least you can see where I'm going to be laying down my shadows rather than me just leave it to you to figure out the rest of the tail. For me, I really do like to try and make elements look 3D, and especially for this tail, I thought it was absolutely necessary to make all those feathers, all the feathers on the tail look individual and look 3D. I thought it would give more of a wow factor to the peacock, and so yeah, I did spend a bit of time doing those shadow areas to give that 3D effect. Again, this is my style of colouring, and I like putting in that extra time. I'm not very speedy with my colouring. I don't rush through my pages. I just like to take my time and create the effects that I like on a page. And so for me, I don't mind if it takes me ages to do a page, but I know some people don't like that, or they don't like they find it quite monotonous layering, and that's absolutely fine. Everyone has a completely different style of colouring, and layering may not be your thing. So see what works for you, and you may not need to put as many layers as I do, but I do really like doing that. definitely did not think that having just one shade of feathers in the tail is going to work well. I needed to break up all those bright, intense blues, and I decided to then start working on the turquoisey blues or the cobalt greens and bringing a bit of green into the feathers. And so I started working on those particular feathers. So yeah, I used some like cobalt green, I used light cobalt turquoise. I did put a bit of blue, or no, I put cobalt turquoise possibly. You'll see it on screen. But what I thought made the slight difference was using the light phthalo green, which is very light green, but it's not a very yellowy green, and it just gave that little hint of green to those feathers, that particular combination that I was using. And I think it worked really well in breaking up all those bright blues, and it worked well breaking it up, but it also worked cohesively, like it just worked together. And yeah, I really liked doing that. And I made sure, as you guys probably noticed when I did the basing, that the yellowy orange that I was going to introduce into the feathers were just going to be combined with these turquoisey blues. I thought that would look really nice and they would work well together. So my yellows are going to come on these particular feathers that I'm working on now. On these particular feathers, there were some more Zendoodle patterns to them, and I did think that I wanted to bring out some of the 3D effects. So I actually did color most of the little shapes and patterns rather than just color over them, and I think it worked really well. I think it did give that pop that I wanted on this page. So I didn't color over all of the patterns. I actually worked on the elements, but I think it was still it didn't take me that long, to be honest. I think I liked how it looked working on each individual pattern in this case. Again, I work from my shadow areas to the highlight areas. I use cobalt green as my first pencil, so sort of my mid-tone pencil. And I'll show you how I work with all the color combination. And then I'll show you a few feathers and go ahead and do the rest off screen. But I will show you where I'm putting my shadows with the cobalt green, so that you know how to create that 3D effect if you want to. And yeah, so I just work on these feathers next. I love how the turquoise sea feathers look and how it broke up all those bright, intense blues. I think it works really well. I didn't go as dark in the shadows for these particular feathers so that it doesn't disappear in all the darkness of the blue feathers, and I think it works really, really well, and it gives that variation that you need, and just increases the interest of the tail of the peacock. So now it was time to work on the yellows. I'm not very good at working with oranges and yellows, and sometimes I go too bright. Now in this case, I knew that my flowers were going to be a light pink and peachy pink, so I needed to make sure that the yellows did not look too peach, but I did not want them to be too bright either, that they stood out too much, because I did not want to bring that color in anywhere else on the page. I wanted it to be limited to the peacock. So yeah, I did go for slightly orangey shades. Like I think I went for the light cadmium red, is it, to bring in that orangey effect, but I didn't go too red. I kept it quite yellow and just a little bit of hint of that light cadmium red to bring in the brightness that I wanted in those yellows on the feathers. And I think it worked really well. Again, it didn't take away from the blues. It didn't draw your eyes to just the yellows, and that's what I was afraid it would do, because obviously yellow is such a bright color, but it didn't do that. I think it works really well, and those hints of yellowy orange look really nice on the peacock as well. Once those pops of yellowy orange came into the feathers, I thought that it might actually look nice, the top of the wing of the peacock. I thought it would be nice for it to be a yellowy orange as well. The blues would just make it too blue and would disappear with the rest of the blues on the peacock. So I thought that the making it yellow would work pretty well. And would break up that blue a little bit more. So yeah, I went ahead and based the top of the wing that I hadn't yet based with the yellow shade that I'd used for basing the rest of the yellow bits, and worked with the pencils to bring in the detailing. But I decided not to make it as bright orange, as I did for the tail, and so I think I added a little bit of salmon to tone down the orangey effect on the yellows that I was putting. So it looked a little bit more peachy yellow, if that's a color, but made it look a little bit more peachy than too bright and orange, because it was quite a large area of yellow on the wing. And so yeah, I thought I'd make it tone down the orangeness of it a little bit with the salmon, and hopefully it would also then tie in with the colors I was hoping to use for the flowers as well. And I think it worked really well. I think it looks better than putting blue for the top of the wing. I think if I did put blue, it would take away from the rest of the blue. So from the body of the peacock, it would take away the focus from that. And I think basically the yellow just was a good idea for the top of the wing. that is the peacock pretty much done, and I think it looks fabulous. I think it does look luxurious, it does look rich, it looks elegant, it looks majestic, as I've said many times before in the video already. But yes, it does. I have left out the crown of the peacock for now because I wanted to see how I was going to distribute the rest of the blues and yellows on the page for the other feathers that are sort of floating around in the background. And I wanted to see from that how I was going to do the crown of the head, I think. So for now I left it. I decided to start working on the flowers and leaves. So first I tackled the leaves. Before I go ahead, I put those screenshots there so you can see where I've reached, but you can always pause. So it does help you to sort of see where I've put my shadows and highlights, and you can sort of catch up, because I do quite a bit off screen because for repetitive elements, so that it doesn't get boring for you guys. So you could always pause and catch up if you are following along, that is. So the leaves for me are easy. They're the most relaxing part on a page to do. I actually do find them quite relaxing. But I use my regular green. So I think I use chromium green opaque. I must have used chrome oxide green. You'll see it on screen. Earth green yellowish and maybe dark indigo for the shadows on this particular page. And I kept the highlight area as the base that I had applied with the Tombow. So I didn't cover the entire leaf with the pencils, but I worked from my shadow areas to my highlight areas, or from the areas I want dark to the areas I kept light, and made sure that the highlight areas had no pencil on it, so that the base color of the Tombows showed through as the highlight area. But I still deepened up my shadow areas, even on these small elements. I like to do that, and it gives that, again, 3D effect of almost every element on the page to make everything pop. So yeah, just use my regular colors. I'll show you a few on screen, and then it's just leaves. So I've done the rest of it off screen so that you don't have to see me color all the leaves on the page. For the flowers, I had thought that I would do the peach and the pink flowers. So I started with the pink flowers first. I knew that I had to make sure I did not go too dark with my pinks, otherwise it would take away from the peacock. And so I just used a couple of shades of pink on my pink flowers. And I think the darkest shade I used was a pink carmine, and I did not deepen up the shadows that much, I don't think. As always, I start from my shadow areas and move into the highlight areas. So I'll show you an example of a couple, and then I do the rest off screen, but I will show you where I'm going to lay down my shadows so that you can, if you want to, create that 3D effect as well on the flowers too. So I used pink carmine, and I think I used possibly salmon. So that it was more of that fleshy pink rather than a very bright pink or red pink. So, and I used a bit of white to create a bit more highlights. So the highlight area was the Tombow dual brush pen base that I'd applied, but I brightened up the base a little bit more with a white pencil as well over the top. For the peach flowers, I used the yellows I think I used in the Peacock to tie it in a bit, and a combination of the yellows with pinks to make it look peach. And I think it worked really well. I think the pink flowers and the peach flowers looked really good together, and they were subtle. They did not take away from the Peacock at all. Again, I'll show you a couple of examples and then I'll do the rest of it off screen, but I'll show you where my shadow areas are going to be. So just so that you know where to lay down your colors. Wow, I'm really enjoying how this page was coming along, and at this point I knew that I could not add any new colors to the page because the colors that I have on the page are working really well together, and it's exactly what I had pictured for this page. So I had to really control myself not to add any new colors because I find it very hard to do that. I tend to use a lot of different colors on my pages. So yeah, at this stage I knew that I have to be careful now and not add any new colors to the page. So for the elements that I have left that have not got any color on it, I just used the same colors as I've used for the rest of the page, but just sort of distributed it around on the page. So the feathers, I just used the bright blues and the turquoisey blues and green. For some of the feathers, I dotted in a little bit of the yellowy orange that I used as well. And I just distributed it around. You will see certain elements still after this basing part left white because I was obviously going to come in with my glitter gel pens and my metallic gel pens and bring in the shine and sparkle I like to my pages, especially for this page. It did need it. And so I may not color every single element, but you will see me now just distribute the rest of the colors that I have already used on this page on the other elements, come in with my pencils and finish off those elements before I go on to the embellishments. that's the pencil work done, and now it's embellishment time, and I love doing the embellishments on a page. Especially on certain pages, it really helps bring the page to life. Even after putting all that colour down, I still feel the embellishments still add to bringing the page to life, and this page definitely needed the embellishments. So I used a selection of paint pens, Tooliart paint pens, glitter gel pens, a white gel pen, and I will make sure I put it in the description box below everything that I'm using, so you will know, and I will have it up on screen as well. I always start with my paint pen work first because they dry quicker than gel pens and I don't want to smudge everything on the page. So I always start with my paint pen work first, and I used a selection of Tooliart paint pens just to cover up some black lines. They're not very dark black lines, but I just thought it would give a bit of a highlight area. So I used them to cover up some black lines, to create a highlight to certain elements. For example, the flowers, I thought it would look nice for those black lines not to be on the tips of the flowers. I just, went ahead and sort of worked around the page and covered up some of the black lines, created some highlight areas as well. I also used a white gel pen for certain highlight areas because it's bright, and I also used it on the background just to create a few dots here and there, again to give a bit of a highlight to the background. I felt even though the background was nice and subtle and soft like I wanted it to be, I still felt I needed to make it look a little bit more grand because the peacock was really popping off the page, so I needed to give a bit more interest to the background as well. So to begin with, I started with my white gel pens, and I sort of had the idea that I was going to come and do a bit of sprinkling on the page as well with ink, which I'll mention in a minute. Once my paint pen work and gel pen work white gel pen work is done, I then went ahead and did my glitter gel pen work, and this is what I really wanted to do on the page, because from the beginning of the page I knew that I wanted to use a lot of gold on the page, and I was going to use my Pentel hybrid dual metallic in gold to bring in a lot of glamorousness on the tail of the peacock. I know that's not a word, but you know what I mean. I wanted it to look really luxurious, really rich, and how do you do that? Gold, right? So first I dotted around a little bit of glitter gel pens in like a pink and maybe blues around the page, and then I went to work with my gold Pentel hybrid dual metallic, and with that I went ahead and put in a lot of detailing on the tail of the peacock and the crown, and did a lot of lines, a lot of dots, and just brought in so much sparkle to those feathers. And I know in a photograph it won't really look or show glittery or sparkly, but when I turn the page, when I look at that page, I can see that grandness on the page. And so I went to town with my gold gel pen, and I love it because the gold with those blues and turquoises work beautifully, and it also works really well with those pinks and peaches. So I think this color palette just worked really wonderful for my page, and it's exactly what I sort of had in mind for my peacock especially. And so I spent quite a bit of time. It took me quite a bit of time going over all the details that I wanted to go over with the gold glitter gel pen, but I took my sweet time, I relaxed, I did it, and I think it looks wonderful. After I'd finished with my glitter gel pen work, then I decided that the background I was going to do a little bit more just to make it pop a bit more, because it looked too dull. It looked too boring for what the main element on the page was. And so I decided to use some Winsor & Newton white ink just to give it a bit of highlight. So I just sprinkled in the corners, so the top corners and the bottom corners, not over their illustration. I just wanted it in the corners to give a bit more interest really. And of course then I used a bit of Winsor & Newton gold ink over the top, again just tapped it with a paintbrush and sprinkled it in the corners, again just to give a bit of interest to that background. I did not go over the peacock or any other elements with that sprinkling in effect. I just limited it to the corners, and I think it just helped make the background look a little bit more interesting. and I felt like it brought everything together because yes, the main elements on the page were popping and were standing out, and the background was getting a little bit lost. So that little bit of sprinkling just helped, I think. You guys can let me know what you guys think. And that concludes the page. That was the final part to my to adding stuff to to this illustration, and I am so happy with how it turned out. And for someone who shies away from doing peacocks, I'm actually happy with the end result of this peacock, and I think I was able to put to paper what I had in my mind. And it's very rare that I have an image of what a page is going to look like. At the end, I just have an idea of a couple of elements and then I just go with the flow. But for this page, I did have something in mind, and yeah, it matched up. So I'm really happy with that. I really enjoyed colouring in this book. The quality, like I say, of Page Street Publishing is amazing, and your colouring session is just, it's a dream working on this paper. So I really enjoyed my second page in this book, and Lalita Iyer's artwork is beautiful as well, and I hope that she will in the future come up with new books as well, because yeah, I really enjoyed colouring the 2 illustrations I have so far. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this colour along, and if you do follow along, I would love to see your pages. As you guys know, I love seeing them on Instagram. Tag me, or if you just want to email it to me, that's also fine. It just makes me happy that somebody is watching and somebody is interested in these colour alongs. They take so long to put together. Forget the colouring bit, it prolongs the colouring session as well. For doing a page for a colour along. In my own colouring time, it's so much quicker. But yeah, when I'm recording it, it does take a while because I'm planning out the colours. I have to make sure I get the right colours out. I need to put the colours on screen. And so it does take a while actually colouring the page. And then the editing is a whole different story. So yeah, hopefully some of you do enjoy watching these colour alongs. So thank you for watching and for all your support as always, for all your love, and yeah, hopefully I'll keep bringing more videos for you guys. So until the next video, thank you for watching, enjoy the rest of it, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.